Hello students, Dr. Miller here, and I'm going to give you some feedback on assignment number 2. This was the first opportunity for you to take your photo gear and get out and take some photos, and we used the same basic set of genres. There are other genres, and we will get into a couple of them later, but we really want to focus for this initial part of the class on portraits, landscapes, the candid documentary lifestyle or journalistic, whatever you want to call it. Then we have close-ups and action and creative or artsy, and 2 images for each one of these types of photographs, and asked you not to edit them in any way and to submit only photos taken for this class. Well, in general, you did very, very well, and there were some great images that I saw in this assignment. There were some that were needing some assistance, and there were a few that kind of missed the mark. But in general, you did really, really well, and very happy with that. Let's look at some of the ones you turned in. In the portrait, Janaya turned in this portrait, and this is an outstanding portrait for several reasons. The overall just kind of look of the subject is great, and the contrast is what really makes this, because here you have this fleshy oval. It's the head of the subject, and you've got this background, and then the clothing here all really draw your attention right to the subject, and that's excellent. What we talked about last time was the rule of thirds. In portraits, you don't really need to follow that as long as your subject is the main thing, and I mean main, getting in pretty close like this one. You can just totally ignore the rule of thirds, or you can try it and see what the difference is. Remember, you can take lots of photos. One of the students told me that she had taken over 100 photographs for this assignment. Well, that's what you probably need to do, and then you can go through them and select the best. So don't just try to do it all in one day either. I mean, you could, but if you have the opportunity to get out a few times, use some different backgrounds, it shows me that you are working towards being a great photographer. Let's look at the next photo. This is from Mona, and it's a animal portrait, and we had a number of those, some cute dogs, etc. But I really like this one, and again, you've got this contrast with the background and then the white horse here. Probably could have used just a little bit more space down here below the nuzzling part of the horse. That's pretty picky, but I mean, it would have been a little bit better with that. Not a big deal though. Now, the contrast, as I mentioned, with the background is great, but what makes this outstanding is the light. And this, and we'll see this in another couple of the photographs for other categories, I'm guessing this was probably taken in the early morning or late afternoon. When you take photographs in the part of the day where the sun is low, you can really have some neat shadows, and the light itself has a different quality. If you're out in the middle of the day where the sun is directly overhead, you can still get some good photos, but you're not going to have the shadows to help you out. So late afternoon, early morning are the really better times to get out and take photos. This is a landscape from Danielle, and here's the rule of thirds right here, is that the horizon is pretty much on the thirds line going across, and that's great. This illustrates that concept of perspective, where you have the lines from the road and the lines from the painted separator lane lines. They're all meeting down here at this vanishing point, and that vanishing point is approximately where the sun is. So that's really nice. The fact that the trees here and some of this stuff really just kind of turns to black. Doesn't really matter a whole lot. Clouds are really nice. Pretty good landscape. The one thing that it would be nice to not have are power lines. I dislike power lines in photographs, but I can show you a way that we can actually get rid of power lines when we get into the photo editing part of the class. Janai submitted this landscape. Interesting that both of these that I've selected turn out to be vertical landscapes. Everybody always thinks of landscapes as horizontal, but these are illustrations that they don't have to be, for sure. Again, lines. You got a nice diagonal here. You got this structure. You got the opposite side line, and then you have the bridge. So this makes it all very interesting. You got some good light. You can see all the detail in the foreground here. You still can see detail in the bridge and trees and so forth. So nicely done on that landscape. In the Candid or documentary category, this is a really nice capture by Jennifer of this bird in flight. You can see a fully extended wings, the feet are back. This is a really nice shot of the bird. And you know, in these documentary things, you just have to take the pictures. And if you take pictures, take a lot of pictures. You can take 100 pictures of this one bird, and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or so of them will be great. And the more you take, the more you have to choose from. So if it were controllable, if the bird were down just a little bit, like right in here, it'd be slightly better composition. But you just have to do what you do when you're shooting a kind of a documentary style. This is Rebecca's Candid, and I love it. The eagerness of this dog, and then the kind of like this dog looking directly at the camera. I think that's kind of neat. The positioning on this wall and their angles that they both make, and their tails and all that. That is really great. Be nice if this house weren't back here. I love the fence, actually. But again, you capture the moment. That's what candids and documentaries really are to capture the moment. And so this is a really nice photograph. In close-ups, we have Mona, and this is a really great close-up photo for a number of different reasons. The focus is nice and crisp on the flower, but the background here is out of focus, and this is what we call bokeh, B-O-K-E-H, and it's an effect you want to try to perfect. And this is very nice. You've got lots of petal detail on this, and of course the color standing out against the muted backgrounds here makes this really nice. In general, photographers that are starting out do not get close enough, and it's a challenge because it's sort of an equipment issue. And if you have an iPhone, you might think you can't get a close-up, but you know, in reality, you can get your iPhone down there about 3 or 4 inches away from your subject, and that's pretty close. You can do okay with it. There's actually a video about taking photos with an iPhone that are close-up photos, so please look at that if you haven't. And with other cameras, like a single lens reflex camera, it's really about the lens. If you have a lens that has a macro feature, that's a close-up feature, and that's great because you can use that all you want and you get really close-up photos. But there are some other devices and techniques that you can use, and we'll talk about those in a lesson that's particularly about close-ups. This is a nice dramatic close-up by Danielle. Nice plain background here that makes the ring really nicely contrasted with it. The placement of the ring on this thirds line, the lower thirds line, is completely appropriate. If it were on the upper thirds line, it would be too far away. So interesting that she made this a vertical, but I think it really works. And here's Emma's close-up, and this is an example. I have too many students that take a picture of a person's head, the whole head, and it's not a close-up, it's a portrait. If you take a picture of a person's eye or ear or something like that, that's a close-up. Close-up means close up. So Emma did a nice job on this. You can see the animal's wrinkles in here, a lot of nice detail, but this is bokeh back here. This is out of focus. So your eye is drawn right here to this eye, and guess what? Here's this rule of thirds line going here, and here's this rule of thirds line here. So this is perfectly placed for that. Notice the reflection. If you look close, I believe this is our photographer Emma in here, and that's not a problem. It's really kind of interesting actually, but this is a really excellent close-up. Let's look at action. And action is an area that people have some difficulty with. You don't take a photograph of people just sort of standing around and say it's an action photo. A static object is not action. You have to have some form of action. And this is an example of a shot where you see the action of the water escaping this water balloon that's been pierced. And so Rebecca put some thought into this, and that's something I really, really appreciate, because she conceptualized this as being potentially a good photo, and she pulled it off. Now the water flying out here is frozen, and the technique that is used to do this, and your current assignment will address this, is you use a fast shutter speed. So if you're shooting and you can set your camera where the shutter speed is like 1/1000th of a second, you're going to capture these water droplets as they fly out, and that makes a nice effect. Now, I would probably prefer that there was a different background here than these trees, but that's just kind of being picky. I like the thought that went into this, and the execution of it with a fast shutter speed was great. So here's another action, and it's also by Rebecca, because these are the two best action shots because they show two different ways of dealing with action. One is to freeze the action, and we saw that with a water balloon, and the other is to use a slower shutter speed. So if you shoot at like 1/15th of a second, that's pretty slow, and you'd probably want to, if you hand hold it, you want to be really, really still or put it on a tripod. If you shoot slower than 1/15th, you probably really need a tripod. But here's what happens. When that shutter is open for a longer period of time, the motion continues while the shutter is open. And so you capture the motion. Now the guy's blurry, so what? He was moving. The cue stick is blurred up because, you know, when you make that shot, you typically raise the tip of the cue stick up. Now look at the balls down here. They're moving and they leave a trail. So this one actually bounced and left that trail. This one's heading over here, and here's that trail. So all the other stuff back here is not moving. It's all static. So this is interesting, and it shows that technique. So the two things you can do is you can freeze the action, or you can use the action motion to create a blurred effect. And those are two techniques you need to master. A little more difficult when you're using an iPhone or even some point and shoot cameras that don't have the ability to set the shutter, but you can try some other things that can help you. All right, when I asked you to do creative, it doesn't mean just taking a good photograph. I mean, I guess all good photographs are in a sense creative, but this category is a little more in terms of kind of thinking about something that would be creative and make an artistic effect. Now, when we get into the editing, you can use editing to make any photograph more artsy. And you can do that by manipulating the contrast, lightness, darkness. You can also add filters. If you shoot Instagram, you know about adding filters. And so this photograph is great because Emma thought, well, if I have this chalk art here and the strings of the balloons are coming down here, if I place this girl here laying down and kind of positioning her hand like she's holding this, that would be interesting. And it is interesting. So really great, great job of thinking ahead. All right, here's Jennifer, and sometimes you see stuff even you don't even imagine it, and then there it is, and you can make it an artistic photograph. And I'm not sure if she positioned these things or just took advantage of what was there. I don't even know what it is. So in this sense, this is called an abstract image. An abstract means you can't really connect it to something real, some point of reality. But this is a beautiful photograph, and it's the lines and these circular shapes, and then above all, the colors. So this is excellent. I mean, it's just a great image. I really, really like that. And that's what you need to be thinking about, is when you're shooting to be really creative, this is where the art part of photography really takes over. And generally, these would be images that are sort of thought about. So that was good. I have a few more here. This one is from Rebecca, and it's just I love this building, and that's what makes it a great photograph is the building. But she did a good job of filling the frame with it. This stair structure here makes the building really interesting, as do these once windows, I guess. So that's a cool photo. The only thing is you got this power line here. It's not really that big a deal in this photo, but when we get into photo editing, we can make that line go away. All right, this is Emma, and this is a really good creative technique, shooting through glasses, and the fact that the frame here is out of focus isn't a big deal. Kind of wish that there was a little more interesting subject out here. If I were Emma, I would try this technique again, and maybe try to get something more interesting right here in this frame. This is a great line of thirds thing right in here. So she's got the right idea, and it makes an interesting photo, but it could be a really outstanding photo if there were maybe a different subject out here. So good job on that. This is close-up, and it's either a close-up or a really big ant, but I'm thinking it's a close-up, and it's a great photo, and it's excellent for a couple of reasons. One of them is the texture of the surface, the contrast of the black ant and the grayed background is really nice, and above all, again, the light. This has got to be late afternoon when you have the long shadows. If this was taken at noon, it would not be nearly as interesting. You wouldn't see the texture that shows up, because really what you've got here is you've got shadowing, even though it's relatively flat, pieces of wood. But the reason you're seeing the texture is because of the light. And this shadow image of the ant really makes this a great photo. So that was great. And this is a good one from Jennifer. I would probably prefer to see this horizontal horizon area not quite so steeply pitched to the right, but it may be just that's what it is. And if you tilt it too much, you might lose the appropriate effect of the waterfall, and the fall is the main thing in this photograph. So it's pretty interesting. Be careful though about backgrounds, and this is true for portraits and other images. You have to look at what you're doing, not just on the subject, but also what else is in the photograph. If you have too much stuff that clutters up your background, it detracts from the primary subject. So when you're looking through your viewfinder or on your iPhone, think, okay, the subject's okay, what's in the background? And can I improve the background by maybe walking around to a different angle? What happens if I bend down? What happens if I lay down? What happens if I get on a ladder? Just different things like that. If you're changing your angle and walking around to get the best shot, you can usually eliminate some of the clutter. Shooting with the bokeh technique is also a way. You can have a cluttered background, but if it's fuzzed out, it's not going to hurt your image. And one more, this is Jennifer. This is a great photograph, and it's got some really nice lines, including the shadow here, the nose, and nice bokeh effect in the background. But really what makes this outstanding is the light, and again, it's probably early morning or late afternoon when you have long shadows, and that creates very interesting light and dark. But it also brings out all these details in here that would not be seen if it was just the middle of the day. So excellent work on that as well. All right, so overall you guys did great, and you're going to get full credit for this assignment, and the next assignment you're going to get full credit if you just turn it in and you have the right number of photos, follow the directions, you get full credit. After that, I'll start grading each photograph, but don't worry about it. You're off to a great start. This class has done excellent work and has been timely for the most part, and I appreciate you very much. But if you have any questions, just message me through Blackboard. Thanks.